Hello and welcome. I'm Laura Cronk, the director of the Creative Writing Program here at the New School, and it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome you here tonight. The New School has been a home for writers in New York since 1931, and in partnership with the National Book Foundation, we've hosted the annual National Book Awards finalist reading for more than 20 years. I want to thank Lisa Lucas, Anna Dobbin, and the whole team at the National Book Foundation for all they do for writers and literature and what they did to put tonight together. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our Executive Dean, Mary Watson, and my colleagues here at the New School who make the magic happen, especially Lori Lynn Turner, Ben Fama, Justin Sherwood, Kelly Stewart, Imwa Egobamian, Victoria Richards, and Elizabeth Lothian. Thank you. This night is one of the very best nights of the year for readers and writers, and it's one of our favorite nights of the year at the New School. It's a true celebration of the depths and scope of the work being published now. If your faith in the brilliance and imagination of the other people who are sharing this time on earth with you has flagged, tonight is a cure. Because it's important to note that all of the finalists tonight are becoming an important part of our literary history, which the National Book Foundation chronicles and makes accessible, I'd like to focus the evening by reading an excerpt of a poem about being a writer by Denise Levertov, who was a poetry finalist 50 years ago on this night, for her book, The Sorrow Dance. This is from the poem Claritas. The all-day bird, the artist, white-throated sparrow, striving, in hope and good faith, to make his notes ever more precise, closer to what he knows. And now, please join me in welcoming the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, Lisa Lucas.
Hi, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Excellent. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. And thank you to the entire New School team, Lori Lynn Turner, Mary R. Watson, Pamela Tillis, and everyone who worked on putting together this night. 20 years we've had a home here, the New School. 20 years we've sold out this room to come hear all of the National Book Award finalists. It's actually really something. The first time, well, I guess when I started this job, before I had ever been to one of the National Book Award finalists reading, I thought, do I have to go to that? That sounds long. And then I did, because obviously it was my job, and it would have been really, really, really rude if I hadn't. And it was just absolutely magical. It's one thing to announce a long list. It's one thing to announce the finalists, right? But then you get to the night before the awards, and everyone is here in New York and real and excited and supported by friends and family and publishers and just brilliant and sparkling. And the books that you've been looking at on the shelf for 3 months or a year, however long you've had it, like start to turn into these real objects. You're so grateful for every bit of information that you've been given, for every time you've been moved, for every time you've wept over a story that breaks your heart. And then you get to be here in the room with everyone. It's so special. And so I'm really glad that all of you readers came here to celebrate this with us, because it's just really an important night. And it is not a dare to listen to them read for 3 minutes, and I have a super soaker with which I will super soak anyone who reads over the allotted time. So, a couple of housekeeping things. First, tonight, Terrence Hayes and Yoko Tawada will not be here with us, but they will be here with us in spirit. And we will have Monique Trung reading from The Emissary, and we will have Mahogany L. Brown reading for Terrence Hayes. So that's exciting. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the outstanding efforts of our 2018 awards judges, who are not here tonight, lest they be swayed by a particularly charismatic reading. They read over 1,600 submitted titles this year. And with great passion and acuity, they were able to winnow those down to 25 finalists in the categories of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, young people's literature. And for the first time since the 1970s, in a reimagined iteration, translated literature, which makes our family that much bigger. These finalists represent some of the most remarkable work being published today, and we could not be more pleased to be able to present their work. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Book Foundation. The National Book Awards are like the crescendo of a whole year's worth of work that is not just a big party or a big reading. We're best known for the awards, of course, but we also host educational and public programming across the country year-round. Our mission, which has been revised this year, is to celebrate the best literature in America, to expand its audience, and to ensure that books have a prominent place in American culture. Tonight and tomorrow at the National Book Awards, we're going to celebrate the best literature in America. But every single day, 365 days a year, we work to elevate books and to serve and build readers across the country. Through our Book Rich Environments initiative, which is in year 2, we've just hit about 700,000 books that have gone to young people and families in public housing throughout America, in 19 states. In its first season, NBF Presents is bringing free readings, panels, and author talks to libraries, colleges, festivals in states across the nation. And actually, between those two programs, by the end of this year, we'll only have 17 states left to hit, which is exciting, right? All 50 states. That's the goal, right? That's the dream. We believe in the unparalleled power of books, and tonight's finalists are a wonderful reminder of why. These 25 titles are at turns heartbreaking and hilarious. They provide illumination and escape. They cultivate empathy and insight. They offer glimpses at worlds and lives that are able to surprise, infuriate, and inspire us. These books are nothing short of remarkable, and we feel unbelievably lucky to be here with you tonight, able to be moved by these stories and voices of these authors and of these translators. I'd like to also thank the National Book Awards staff, and that's my last bit. It seems effortless, we just made that in Word. Y'all just showed up. It's a lot of work, and every single day the work that we do, arranging tables and emailing authors and asking people for favors and trying to get media to pay attention to all of this is because books actually really legitimately matter. And making this week special means that books matter. Just like the Oscars, all that work goes in because film believes in itself, and we have to remind ourselves that we as readers believe in ourselves. And that's why we do all this work. Sometimes people yell at us on Twitter and say, oh, that dinner is expensive and it's so fancy and exclusive, but the point is to say that it's worth taking the time to put something together like this for all of you and for all of you readers. And the team at the office, Anna Dobbin, Mark Lee, Gabrielle Rucker, Meredith Andrews, Nicole Swift, Jordan Smith, I can't read my handwriting, Jordan Smith, Whitney Hu, and Beth Harrison work so hard, and we're so grateful for all of you. So now I'm gonna shut up, get off stage, get my Super Soaker ready, and turn things over to our fantastic hosts here for the third time and signing up for next year. Isaac Fitzgerald and Saeed Jones of BuzzFeed News' morning show AM to DM, where we announced our finalist list. They are our big friends, and we love them very much. Thank you to all of our finalists, to their teams, friends, family, and to our sponsors who pay for everything. On behalf of all of us at the National Book Foundation, we hope you enjoy this evening of literary magic.
This is it. Oh my goodness.
Woo! They work hard.
Really hard.
They work hard.
Really hard.
How hard?
Very.
Hard.
Incredibly hard for the books. Listen, we have to listen. It's like New York. It's busy. It's cold outside. Everything's going on. Let's take a moment and remember that this is a transformative turning point in the lives of everyone in this room and everyone who appreciates the work that exists in this room. So let's just start with like a round of applause for
Yeah.
that.
Woo! But it's also New York. We gotta keep things moving, so let's hit them with the rules.
Okay, this is how this evening's going to work. We are your traffic directors. Okay, there are going to be 4 groups of readers tonight. Each group will be for one category, as well as having at least one reader from the translated literature finalist. Hello, translated literature finalists. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
This is so lovely.
Excellent.
We love it. And so we'll have a translated literature finalist read at the end of the first 3 groups, and then one at the beginning and end of the 4th group.
All right, like a sprinkling of translated literature all throughout the evening. Okay, each finalist will come to the stage one at a time. How long are they gonna read for?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, that's right. We are so proud of you. Everyone in this room is so proud of you. It is so incredible. You've worked your entire lives to get to this moment.
3 minutes.
Don't take that time from somebody else. Don't take that time from somebody else.
Lisa is right there.
The Super Soaker is real.
We're in the splash zone.
It's,
Just saying.
but for real, the translated literature finalist authors will read a paragraph in the language the book was originally written in. Which
this.
means we're going to be hearing French, Norwegian,
Ooh.
Italian,
Ah.
Japanese,
Ah.
and Polish.
We.
That wasn't
They don't
Polish.
say that there?
Nah.
It's fine. Okay, also, I think I have my phone on airplane mode. I'm gonna check too, accountability. This is a good time to put your phone on airplane mode or silent or whatever. You don't wanna be that girl.
Don't
Do you
steal
wanna be that
people's time.
girl?
Don't steal people's
Do you wanna
time.
be that person? You don't. You don't. Okay, are you ready? Have we like shaken everyone up into being excited?
I'm awake.
Okay, me too. I am as well. Okay, so before we go any further, whatever happens tomorrow night is going to happen and it's going to be amazing. But we, of course, want to celebrate the finalists right here, right now. So will all the finalists please stand up so we can applaud you?
Stand up and face the audience. Face your fans. Face your fans. Take it in. Take it in.
Yeah.
Take it in.
I love it. I gotta say, I think that might have been the best round of applause 3 years going now.
That was really good.
Pretty good.
It's a good audience.
All right.
It's a good audience. All right, my friends, we're going to get started with young people's literature.
Woo!
Elizabeth Acevedo, M.T. Anderson and Eugene Yelchin, Leslie Connor, Christopher Paul Curtis, Jarrett J. Krasowska, Nagar Javadi, and translator Tina Cover.
The first words. Pero tú no eres fácil is a phrase I've heard my whole life. When I come home with my knuckles scraped up, pero tú no eres fácil. When I don't wash the dishes quickly enough, or I forget to scrub the tub, pero tú no eres fácil. Sometimes it's a good thing. When I do well on an exam, or the rare time I get an award, oh, pero tú no eres fácil. When my mother's pregnancy was difficult, and it was all because of me, because I was turned around and they thought that I would die, or worse, that I would kill her. So they held a prayer circle at church, and even Father Sean showed up to the emergency room. Father Sean, who held my mother's hand as she labored me into the world, and Papi paced behind the doctor, who said this was the most difficult birth she had ever been a part of. But instead of dying, I came out wailing, waving my tiny fist. And the first thing Papi said, the first words I ever heard, pero tú no eres fácil. You sure ain't an easy one. What I wish my parents would know. My mouth cannot write you a white flag. It will never be a Bible verse. My mouth cannot be shaped into the apology you say both you and God deserve. And you want to make it seem like it's my mouth's entire fault because it was hungry and silent, but what about your mouth? How your lips are staples that pierce me quick and hard, and the words I never say are better left on my tongue, since they only would have slammed against the closed door of your back. Your silence furnishes a dark house, but even at the risk of burning, this moth always seeks the light. Thank you.
Hi, I'm M.T. Anderson. So this book, The Assassination of Brangwyn Spurge, sort of a spy novel set in Mordor, you could think of it. There is a goblin named Verfel showing an elfin guest around. The elfin guest is actually a spy sending images, which are actually by my collaborator, Eugene Yelchin, back. And the reader knows that those images are getting more and more wildly distorted as time goes on. The next several days were not easy for Verfel. He was very eager to show the elfin emissary around, but nothing ever seemed to make Magister Brangwyn Spurge happy. Since Spurge had not appreciated the de Burgh's attempt to cook elfin cuisine, Verfel took Spurge out to a fine restaurant and treated him to local goblin delicacies. Steaks of the fierce gorolaptor, sizzling in plum sauce, and mosses swimming in the thick, peppery cheeses of the Burgash mountain area, smoked plesiosaur, crunchy fried tendons from the bludge. Spurge gagged. He pushed his plate away. He murmured that everything was too spicy, too smoky, too heavy, too greasy. All the flavors were too strong. So Verfel tried to show Spurge the glories of goblin culture and history. He introduced him to the cream of goblin society. Everyone was gracious and thrilled to meet the elf emissary. But Spurge hardly spoke. He sat, looking conceited and uncomfortable, straight as a broom. I'll try to show him that goblins can be fun, Verfel thought. So during a furious thunderstorm, he took Spurge out onto the streets to watch the children jumping from rooftop to rooftop with their elaborate metal wands trying to catch lightning bolts. Look, Verfel said, isn't this scene joyous? Apparently, Spurge was not convinced. Spurge actually seemed somewhat distressed by the mother-daughter Flower Day parade. Was the singing of the March of the Blossoms too loud? Or maybe elves were not familiar with living dragonvine? Verfel's elfin guest certainly seemed nervous about the dance of the flowers. Whenever the plants threw the dancers up in the air or kissed a woman with sloppy affection, the elf flinched, as though her head were being bitten off. Magister Spurge did not seem much more pleased by the solemn museum of eminent skins. He did not take any interest in the discarded skins of famous goblin heroes and actors, despite all of the interesting dioramas. At the end of the tour, he did not even want to pet the slough of Vertigrin the Wise for good luck. It seemed Verfel couldn't win. And then here are the images that follow that. Do I click it?
Yes. We can do it together.
Oh, you know what? You loaded unfortunately, the wrong images are loaded. So have a good evening.
I see the images right here. If you lived in Merrimack, you might know our place. It's the crumble-down house out on Swaggertown Road. Sits on a good bit of acres, used to be a whole lot more. Developers. My Uncle Drum says we can't live without them. My grandma says we should have tried. You might know our orchard. You might remember it looking live as a hive late in summer. PYO, pick your own. If you're like me, your eyes about pop out of your head at how quick the developers dozered down the trees. They're still building new houses up the hill, down the hill from our place. You might look at our house sitting in the middle and wonder why it looks like somebody emptied a dustpan over it. I try. I sweep up the porch, pull weeds out front, but I am now and then about it, and I don't keep up. Uncle Drum says, just leave it. Then another shingle drops off the roof and lands in the yard. But the crumble down is still home, the place I start from every day. If I had a story, it might begin there, but tell you what, it would not be long before I got to the parts that could ruin anybody's lunch. I sit in the swoof, that's the social work office, staring at my sandwich, not eating. Must be my mind has gone deep. I think this. Benny Kilmartin is part of my story, best friends since first grade. The Kilmartin place is not far down the road from my house, walking distance. I went to Benny's house a lot, and he came to mine, like brothers with two homes, so I got close with Benny's dads. Andy is the most at-home dad, a carpenter, a house painter. Benny's other dad is Franklin. He works in an office in the city. But it was Andy who always watched for the bus, so I miss him. But most of all, I miss Benny. Benny's been gone since the end of 5th grade. Springtime, apple blossom season, that's a year plus a few months. He died in May, and now it is the 2nd September since. Second bloom, second apple time. I think of the apples because Benny died in the orchard, our orchard. That's the story Lieutenant Bard wants. I already told him. I told everyone. I found Benny still as a stone right under the tree fort. I saw the ladder was broken, top rung snapped and hanging. Saw that just before I tried to make Benny Kilmartin breathe again. I guess it was not the best ladder. I told everyone that I was sorry about that. I wish I'd built that better. But the ladder was not broken at supper time when I jumped down from the tree fort heading for home. I got no idea what made that rung give out. I didn't then, and it don't now. So now you know it. My best friend is dead. Tell you what, it puts a fly in my head thinking about what happened to Benny Kilmartin.
Thank you very much. I have to set this up. My story is the journey of little Charlie. It's the tale of a sharecropper's son who is shanghaied into going into, this is Michigan, and I used to say that we from Michigan are very proud that we're the only state that can hold up a part of our body and give an accurate map of our state. I don't say it anymore because someone from Florida said, wait a minute. Anyway, he comes north to try to recapture some people who have escaped from slavery, and they lived in Buxton, which was the place that many of the escaped slaves went to. We hear the stories about the Underground Railroad, and once they get to Canada, it's like they vanished. They didn't. They went to Buxton. So he is up going north, and he and the man who's taking him, a man named Captain Buck, stop and are at a campfire with a bunch of other people, and one of them is telling about his life as an engineer in the railroads. And he tells about how they come to this one bridge that everybody knew was going to collapse sooner or later. And what they would do is, and this is true, they set the crew would get off, leave the passengers on. They had something that would set the train at 3 miles an hour. It would go across the bridge. They'd walk across and get on it. One day, of course, the train went down. The crew was very pleased because they weren't on it, and everybody was killed. But then they realized they'd have a problem. How are they going to explain this to the company? So once one of them locomotives hit the track and hit the water, everyone inside it gets turned into large pieces of fried chicken. So identifying bodies wasn't going to be something no one put too much effort into. We pulled it off. The company was kind enough to notify our families and supply each one of them with a great big crispy piece of meat in a box for burying. I didn't have the nerve to do it, but I hear a couple of other fellas wore disguises and went to their own funerals so they could see what folk really thought of them. I couldn't understand what good that information was going to do them. I was just grateful for getting a second chance at making a new life for myself. I remember thinking at the time, 'tis too bad this can't be a regular part of living, where we all get a chance to walk away from whatever train wreck we made of our lives and run off to start up building something new. He looked off to the side and spit. Only trouble with that is all you end up doing is building that same old life back up again. You just the actor moving on to another performance. You might get a different group of characters, a different set, but in the end, you starring in the same old stinking play. One morning, you're going to wake up and wonder who was the lucky ones, them that went down with the train and was snuffed out quick, or them that lived on was having to get their train wrecks played out slow over years and years.
So to give you some backstory to this is a graphic, Hey Kiddo is a graphic memoir. And it's a story of my growing up being raised by my grandparents because my mother was addicted to heroin and she was in jail. And I didn't know who my father was. But my grandparents sent me to art classes. Week after week, I'd get to Mark's classroom and I would work my butt off. I didn't have the motivation to work this hard on my regular coursework for school, but this was everything I wanted in life. One week, I brought in a book that I had just read, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. I couldn't wait to tell Mark all about it. I wanted nothing more than to be a better cartoonist. I figured he'd be super proud of me. This book, to me, this was my ticket to cartoonist stardom. You read this? The entire book. There's this one part where forget everything you learned. Wait, what? Forget everything you learned. Seriously. Books like these, they want you to conform to their style. You don't want to have to go make comics for a company that will control your work. You have a really good thing going for you. You have your own style, some great line work. I dig it. Continue to explore that, all right? Okay. One thing that book did have that I paid attention to was a supplies list. And on the top of that list was a drafting table. If I was to become a professional cartoonist, I needed a good table to work on. This one should suit your needs, but if you wanted to spend a little more money, there's this one over here where no, this one will have everything I need. Here, you can have one of my old lights and my old T-square ruler. Have a seat. You look like a natural, kid. Happy birthday. Hey, the food is here. On the night of my 14th birthday, we had Chinese food delivered. What does your fortune say, Grandma? Today is tomorrow's yesterday. What in the hell does that even mean? Mine says, it's hard to be humble when you are so damn handsome. Oh, you are so full of it. What does it really say? Laugh loudly and often. What does yours say, Ja? You will be successful in your work. Later that night, I taped that fortune to the top left corner of my desk and started working on my contribution to Mark Lynch's anthology. Thank you.
À Paris, mon père, Darius Sadre, ne prenait jamais d'escalator. La première fois que je suis descendue avec lui dans le métro, le 21 avril 1984, je lui en ai demandé la raison et il m'a répondu « L'escalator, c'est pour eux. » Par eux, il entendait vous, évidemment. Vous qui alliez au travail en ce mardi matin d'avril, vous, citoyens de ce pays dont les impôts, les prélèvements obligatoires, les taxes d'habitation, mais aussi l'éducation, l'intransigeance, le sens critique, l'esprit de solidarité, la fierté, la culture, le patriotisme, l'attachement à la République et à la démocratie avaient concouru, durant tous ces siècles, à aboutir à ces escaliers mécaniques installés à des mètres sous terre. À 10 ans, je n'avais pas confiance de toutes ces notions, mais le regard désarmé de mon père, attrapé durant les mois passés seul dans cette ville et que je ne lui connaissais pas, m'ébranla au point qu'aujourd'hui encore, chaque fois que je me trouve face à un escalator, je pense à lui. J'entends le bruit de ses pas qui grimpent les marches dures de l'escalier, je vois son corps légèrement penché en avant par l'effort obstiné, volontaire, ancré dans le refus de profiter du confort éphémère de l'ascension mécanique.
I just want to say I'm terrified of the super soaker, so I try really hard not to go over. In Paris, my father, Darius Sadre, never took the escalator. The first time I went down into a metro station with him on April 21st, 1981, I asked him why. His answer was, escalators are for them. By them, he meant you, obviously. You, the ones who were going to work on that Tuesday morning in April. You, the citizens of this country, with your income taxes and compulsory deductions and council taxes, but also your education, your intransigence, your critical minds, and your spirit of solidarity and pride and culture and patriotism, your devotion to the Republic and democracy. You who toiled for centuries to achieve these mechanical staircases, installed meters underground. At the age of 10, I wasn't conscious of all these ideas, but that helpless look on my father's face, acquired during the months he'd spent alone in this city and which I'd never seen on him before, shook me so much that even today, every time I see an escalator, I think of him. I hear the thumps of his feet on the hard treads of the staircase. I see his body hunched slightly forward from the effort, obstinate and resolute, unshakable in his refusal to take advantage of the momentary comfort of a mechanical ascent. According to Darius Satter's logic, that kind of luxury was a sort of abuse, if not outright theft. His destiny was henceforth joined to the staircases of the world, to the passage of time without surprises, and the indifferent gazes of passers-by. Some of you might already be aware of me. You might remember the bloody incident that happened in Paris, in the 13th arrondissement, on March 11th, 1994. It was the lead story on the 8 o'clock news on France 2. All the next day's newspapers were full of it, of articles stuffed with falsehoods and plastered with pictures of us, with black rectangles blocking out our eyes. You might have seen me in one of those pictures. Maybe you followed the case. I could have led with that, you know. Instead of talking about escalators, I could have opened with the story of what we call the event in our family. But I can't. Not yet. For now, all you need to know is that it's January 19th at 10 past 10 in the morning, and I'm waiting.
Spicy, I liked it. Sassy. You YA people. Okay, group 2, it is time for poetry. Woo! Yes. Ray Armentrout, reading on behalf of Terrence Hayes, Mahogany L. Brown, Diana Coy Nguyen, Justin Philip Reed, Jenny Shua, and another finalist in translated literature, Han Echtovic and Martin Aiken.
That felt like a long walk. Okay, 2 poems. Arch, like an arched eyebrow, traveling alone, you drift. Seahorse, a forgotten, persistent question. Despite your skeptical attitude, it's true that your numbers are crashing. Still, you are rumored to consume up to 3,000 baby shrimp per day. Who doesn't want to be a revenant, to go back to basics in a big way on the small screen, which somehow still survives? Terrific and terrible are cousins, after all. Am I warm or cold? I'm half rhyming, aiming right between quick and dead, like we could thread that needle and keep going. Flicker. When it was them, our parents, dying, the way they tried to deny what was happening, the way they were angry at the wrong things, seemed of a piece with the way they'd always been wrong about us, we thought. The way they were wrong about the world, which they saw only through the haze of their own swath of the past, so that it seemed natural for us to scoff inwardly, even at their deaths. But now it was one of us threatening to get up and walk out of the hospital on his withered legs, sheer sticks, because it was killing him. Clouds of methane rise from dumps outside our city as I drop a square of soft cheese through a slot into the bin marked landfill. Of course, I feel bad about feeling good, about feeling bad about this. But as time speeds up, everything will flicker.
Good evening. I'll be reading for Terrence Hayes from American Sonnets for my past and future assassin. One of the selections I will actually share is not in the manuscript. He took it out, and when I heard it, I decided it was my favorite, so I decided I would share that anyway. That's what happens when you don't come to your reading. These are jokes. He's approved. He's approved. It's okay. American Sonnet for my past and future assassin. But there never was a black male hysteria, as if you weren't the lover of Langston Hughes, forced to hold what you knew of his measure, secret until it drove you mad enough to cruise the dive bars, reciting the poems he wrote about you, but never published or spoke. Lines covered in bruises and stars, almost unhinged lyrics. The man was high yellow, in public, afraid of himself, pretending his music was material when in fact it was the opposite. Like a breath that comes so quickly you know you're breathing ether. Either atmospheric and anonymous as the air against a window, or indefinite and mute as a curtain of wind. American Sonnet for my past and future assassin, unpublished. Side effects include dry spells, dry coughs, dry eyes and crying, photosensitivity, blurred vision, trouble sleeping, trouble with gravity, cold feet, weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, bloodlust and blood loss, memory loss, loss of appetite, belly aches, headaches, heartaches, backaches, bruises, blueness, redness, whiteness, discoloration, itching, wrinkling, slouching, lying, backbiting, pill dropping, a taste for metal, a taste for meddling, a taste for witches' brews, bruised by the motherfuckers who slew all the witches. Side effects include blockages and blockades, a blockhead of state your business, suit yourself, a blockhead strong arm of the law, a warhead, shotgun, point and shoot, downfall, out shelters. Side effects include nausea, dizziness, numbness, dumbness, dementias, deletions, leeches, leches, hexes, hocus pocuses, and if there is justice, spiritual, moral, federal, state, and local charges, you got to get rid of him, he said. You got to get rid of him.
Good evening. 2 years before his suicide, my brother carefully removed himself from family portraits. I wrote a series of triptychs which engages with this family artifact which remains. I'm going to read the third part. So the first part, which I'm not reading, fills in the void. And the part that I'm reading occupies the space around what is no longer there. Triptych. What may exist between appearance and disappearance, between sound and silence, as something that is nearly nothing, slow music, quiet music, spare music. Of sound and form, I fell asleep tonight after feeding us both. It was hard to think of you cold. It was hard to think. You think it was hard to think of you. It was hard to think. While I slept soundful, the wind howled and wet its whistling teeth. It has sound, but no form. What has a form, but no sound? There is no sound for everyone. Not everyone has a sound. There is no sound, for there is no sound there for everyone, is there? Anyone between the sound and the silence, some solitary figure ambling along the oop, no sound in which the performer is silent. He is a point departing. No sound overtaking sound to the verge of vanishing. Oh, sound, no one silhouetted against the empty scores, no duration to arc, but still a space to occupy, an occupation. Tonight I fed you first, then my elf, then fell asleep. We have departed from the cage. That is not a space we occupy. A sister who is dreaming becomes a sister in another sister's dream, momentarily forgetting that music is playing. Something startled me. A voice in the room I thought was empty. Did you jump over? Did you jump back? Over and back? Did you jump? Did you jump back? Did you? Over here, I stretch the replay across the ear and longer. It keeps me alive. 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 It keeps. Thank you.
In the aftermath of the decisions regarding the murder of Freddie Gray, the writer Hanif Abdurraqib tweets, "What is it when a death is ruled a homicide, but no one is responsible for it?" A statement from No One Incorporated. We are not responsible. We have not the capacity to respond, cannot take your call, are not obliged. We promise nothing in return except that we will return, asking that the potential profit this lost life's labor could have produced be accounted for, and blaming our black dead president for the deficit. We are deficient, and without your damage, the world is difficult work to live on. We live on the unanswerable, assert that acknowledgement is inartistic, history is regressive, and aggression looks like no one we know. No one is responsible while we have the luxury to see ourselves as infinite ones, ocean of individual possibility. We are so many blades in the yard, the wind runs screaming invisibly through. We need to have a deeper dialogue about the need for deeper dialogue. But we are always these spondies of speechlessness and cannot process your request, are too busy about our dreams. The celestial bodies appear from here, ripe for colonies and more questions. We are over earthly inquiry, and unfortunately, though your sigh traveled light years from the dark matter of gravity, we're intrigued to find you now are. We will not see you today. We are recessed on narrowing beaches, toasting our gods with a well-sprung red. We cannot source, but are confident the year was relatively good, but here for your trouble for coming so far. And I'll read one short one. Exit Hex. Twice I've turned my head to see a cop inside me find himself in love. His thumb, heavy in the novel of my body, kept my spine from snapping shut. I fucked and found myself while following the bullet to its logical conclusion. Girl, I guess there's glamour in it. Night slid, the street lamps haloed cantaloupe behind me, behind him, while I fondled my keys. One hole in my skull pulled through the plum sky. Mars is light. Thank you.
I'll read 2 poems. Rootless. Between Hanoi and Sapa, there are clean slabs of rice fields and no 2 brick houses in a row. I mean, no 3. See countings hard and half sleep, and the rain pulls a sheet over the sugar palms and their untroubled leaves. Hours ago, I crossed a motorbike with a hog strapped to its seat, the size of a date pit from a distance. Can the solitude be rootless, unhooked from the ground? No matter. The mind resides both inside and out. It can think itself and think itself into existence. I sponge off the eyes, no worse for wear. My frugal mouth spends the only foreign words it owns. At present, on the sleeper train, there's nowhere to arrive. Me? I'm just here in my traveler's clothes, trying on each passing town for size. Ongoing. Never mind the distances traveled, the companion she made of herself, the threadbare 20s not to be underestimated, a wild depression that ripped from January into April. And still she sprouts an appetite, insisting on edges and cores when there were none. Relationships annealed through shared ambivalences, pages that steadied her, books that prowled her until hard daybreak and for months after, separating new vows from the old, like laundry whites. Small losses jammed together so as to gather mass. Stored generations of filtered quietude and some stubbornness. Tangles along the way the comb teeth of the mind had to bite through, but for what? She had trained herself to look for answers at eye level, but they were lower, they were changing all the time. Thank you.
It's winter, it's far north of the North Polar Circle. It's cold and it's snowy, and it's late at night. Øverst snur han seg og ser utover bygda. Gatelyktene lager en avlang, lysende sirkel. Det virker så langt unna. Det er rart at han bor der. Det ser fremmed ut. En ring av lys på en annen planet. Han vil hjem. Han fryser. Kulden svir. Han er stiv i ansiktet, fingrene, lårene. Han vil hjem med en gang. Tenk om han kunne blunke og være fremme. Tenk om han ikke finner veien og går seg vill. Her på toppen av bakken i flomlyset kan alle se ham. En mørk flekk som beveger seg. Han må ikke snu. På den andre siden av haugen fortsetter stien gjennom skogen og videre opp på fjellet. Hvis han snur seg, så får de tak i ham og drar ham med. Da kommer han aldri ut på veien igjen.
At the top, he turns around and looks out over the village. The street lights form a squashed circle, twinkling in the dark. It seems so far away. He finds it odd that he should live there. So very strange it looks, a ring of lights on another planet. He wants to go home. He's freezing cold. The bitter air bites at his skin. His face is stiff, his fingers, his thighs. He needs to go home now. He wishes he could blink and be there. Suppose he can't find his way and gets lost. In the floodlights on top of the hill, he suddenly feels exposed. He could be seen by anyone, a dark fleck moving about against the white. He mustn't turn round. Beyond the hill, the path winds off into the forest and continues up onto the fell. If he turns around now, they'll grab him and snatch him away. He'd never get back to the road, ever again. Thank you.
Come on, give it up for poetry.
What a journey.
Give it up for poetry. And give it up for young people's literature, come on.
Translated literature.
The sprinkle.
I've experienced so much already tonight. Okay, so we're going to have a 5-minute intermission.
That's correct.
Yep.
Let me show you how it could go. Walk out for a little bit. Just walk out real quick.
I'm walking.
What a great outfit. Oh my gosh. Come on, give it up for Saeed's outfit. Take 5 minutes, compliment each other, take photos with one another, use the restroom, smoke a cigarette, do what you gotta do. 5 minutes though, it's 3 minutes plus 2, be back here.
Math.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you take your seats, I'm gonna read the names for group 3, which is nonfiction. Go ahead, give it up for nonfiction, come on. There you go. Colin G. Calloway, Victoria Johnson, Sarah Smarsh, Jeffrey C. Stewart, Adam Winkler, and the translated literature finalist for this group is Domenico Starnone and translator Jhumpa Lahiri.
Good evening. George Washington dominates the formative events of American nation building like no one else. The key events of his life occur in the East, Mount Vernon, Philadelphia, Yorktown, and say little about Native Americans. But Washington's involvement with the West was lifelong, and he consistently looked to Western land, Indian land, for his own personal fortune and for the nation's future. Securing Indian country as a national resource was essential to national expansion, and few people knew more about securing Indian land than George Washington. In one of the most iconic images in American history, Washington stands resolutely in the prow of a boat facing east. Emanuel Lutz's epic 1851 painting, Washington Crossing the Delaware, captures a pivotal moment during the Revolution. After a string of demoralizing defeats and with the rebel army on the verge of disintegration, the Revolution faced its darkest hour. Then, on Christmas night, 1776, Washington led what was left of his army in a daring and desperate attack. In the teeth of a storm, they crossed the ice-clogged Delaware River from Pennsylvania to New Jersey, and roundly defeated a garrison of Hessian soldiers at Trenton. A week later, they defeated a British force at Princeton. The Revolution, for the moment, was saved, and the twin victories breathed life into a cause that had seemed lost. After he died, Washington achieved almost godlike status as the savior of the Revolution and the father of the Republic. But the Revolution was not only a war for independence and a new political order, it was also a war for the North American continent. Washington and the emerging nation faced west as well as east. If Washington did resemble a god, he perhaps most resembled the Roman god Janus. Depicted with two faces looking in opposite directions, Janus was not two-faced in the modern negative sense of the term as duplicitous. As the god of passages and transitions, beginnings and endings, he looked simultaneously to the past and to the future. As America's god of the passage from colony to nation, Washington looked east to the past and west to the future. And when he faced west, Washington faced Indian country. Thank you very much.
September 1797. The boy would be dead before dawn. He was 15, more handsome already than his famously handsome father, who had turned back toward New York City when he received the news. At best, the boy's father would arrive in time to hold his son's hand as the end came. At worst, he would arrive only in time to embrace his grieving wife. The young doctor in attendance had already sent her out of the death chamber. The doctor was solidly built, neither tall nor short, with thick black hair that crowned a massive head. People often noticed his sonorous voice and his piercing eyes, which were so dark as to appear almost completely black. He carried himself with a trace of arrogance, at least his rivals thought so. Friends detected in his ramrod bearing only boundless energy and sound principles. He was a man built to take command of a sick room or a funeral procession. The doctor's name was David Husick, and he was just 28 years old. He knew that his more experienced medical colleagues would try to bring the fever down with cold cloths pressed to the skin, but that measure had already proved useless. As the boy's father raced home, Husick took one last risky gamble. He chose heat instead of cold, drawing a steaming bath and mixing a botanical remedy into the water, a bitter powder called Peruvian bark, made from the cinchona tree native to the Andes. At first, the thin body lay still in the steaming water, but within minutes, the boy began to regain his senses and his pulse quickened. Husick swaddled him in warm blankets and carried him back to the bed, where he slept deeply for several hours before awaking, again delirious. The doctor prepared another bath and then another. The fever slowly receded. The boy would survive. Husick refused to leave the house that night, but he permitted himself to doze in a nearby bedroom after the hours of anxious effort. Suddenly he bolted awake to find the boy's father kneeling at his bedside. It was Alexander Hamilton. Taking Husick's hand, Hamilton said with tears in his eyes that he could not remain one moment longer in his own house without expressing his deepest gratitude. In that moment, Husick became a trusted friend to one of the nation's most famous and powerful men. But his medical intuition that night did more than forge a bond between a founding father and a young physician. It moved Husick one step closer to an idea he had quietly been nursing for 3 years. A few weeks after saving Hamilton's son, Philip, Husick picked up a quill and composed a letter. He meant with his letter to move the earth. Thank you.
Dad saved coins in a giant glass bottle that had previously contained whiskey. One night he reckoned it was time to count them. He poured them onto a fold-out card table in the living room near the fireplace. I watched the pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters trickle down into a pile. Touching the coins with great care, Dad separated them into stacks. He was not a materialistic man. I never knew him to buy anything for himself but work tools. But he lived in a materialistic world, a system of goods and services that required monetary compensation. He added figures on a notepad and a calculator. He left the family room for a while and returned to count the coins a second time. I walked past. "Sarah, come here," Dad said. "What?" I asked. "You have something to tell me?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." Dad sighed and looked at his coins. "I know what you did," he said. What? You took a nickel. No, I didn't, I said. Sarah, don't lie to me. I didn't take it. Just be honest and I won't get mad at you. I didn't. Dad sighed again and put his head in his hands, agonizing over what the moment meant to him. A nickel was unaccounted for, and every missing cent was his fault. Money was what made the world go round, I learned fast. I knew how to compare prices on tags before I knew how to read words. Yet money was a lie. Pieces of paper and metal suggesting prices for goods, services, labor, and human beings themselves in a way that often had more to do with profit than with true value. We were on the losing end of that lie, no matter how many acres of wheat we farmed. Wealth and income inequality were nothing rare in global history. What was peculiar about the class system in the United States, though, is that for centuries we denied it existed. At every rung of the economic ladder, Americans believed that hard work and a little know-how were all a person needed to get ahead. But the American dream has a price tag on it. The cost changes depending on where you're born and to whom, with what color skin, and with how much money in your parents' bank account. The poorer you are, the higher the price. You can pay an entire life in labor, it turns out, and have nothing to show for it. Less than nothing even. Debt, injury, abject need. No matter who you are or what you started with, though, your fortunes are not assured. For decades, more people fell down the ladder than climbed up it. The American economy is less like a dream supported by democracy than it is like an inconsistent God. Most of us, regardless of economic station, sacrifice a great deal to it. And that can be a satisfying agreement. Grandpa Arnie loved working the land, not for the price of wheat per bushel, but because smelling damp earth at sunrise felt like a holy experience. Dad loved building something beautiful out of good lumber, not for the paycheck, but for seeing his own creativity turned into a sturdy, useful structure. The pleasure Mom got when she sold a little house in Wichita wasn't just for the small commission, but for the tears in the family's eyes when she handed them the keys. Work can be a true communion with resources, materials, other people. I have no issue with work. Its relationship to the economy, whose work is assigned what value, is where the trouble comes in. My family's labor was undervalued to such an extent that, while we never starved or went without shelter in a chronic way, we all knew what it felt like to need something essential: food, shoes, a safe place to live, a rent payment, a trip to the doctor, and go without it for lack of money. That's the sort of mess I wanted out of. That's the sort of mess I never wanted you to experience.
Beauty, its variety is infinite. Its possibility is endless. As W.B. Du Bois wrote in 1926. He went on to note, however, that beauty is denied the mass of human beings who are choked away from it and their lives distorted and made ugly. The charge of humanity was a charge to all of us. Quote, "Who shall right this well-nigh universal failing? Who shall let this world be beautiful? Who shall restore to men the glory of sunsets and the peace of quiet sleep?" Unquote. Alan Locke provided one powerful answer to these questions by asserting something quite radical in the 1920s, something radical even today, that Black people are charged with righting this universal failing by demanding the right to beauty in their own lives, lives distorted in the public discourse of race relations and demeaned for not measuring up to standards mistakenly described as white. What Locke demanded is the right of African Americans to beauty, to speak of and write about, and to carve out realms of beauty unnoticed by most of America, because that America itself was lacking in, denied the benefit of, seeing its life as beautiful, ground down daily by a labor unrewarding as much it is blinded by the lack of beauty around it. America was supposed to be the promised land, the place where this universal failing of fallen man was righted, where the glory of sunsets was to be restored, but instead it had become, by 1925, and even by 2018, a place of unquiet sleep. That Locke would cite beauty in a people routinely described as ugly, as recent descendants of apes, as appendages of various human types and inhuman types, was so profound that it took even Du Bois by surprise, especially as it was connected to another equally radical conception that black people could pursue this beauty without reference to white people, or the state of race relations, or the need to protest. This latter concept, seeking and exploring and developing one's deeper connection to beauty, to Africa, to independent humanity, without reference to the ongoing bitter struggle over white supremacy and its debilitating effects, was too much for Du Bois and legions of black pundits and public intellectual sense who've always thought that this was an unusual and perhaps dangerous notion. But it should not have been that surprising a notion that black people had a history, a culture, a being in the world that a philosopher like Locke would call an ontology, that existed and flourished regardless of whomever they were dropped off with or denigrated by in whatever century that we considered. A people, yes, an often used but seldom understood concept, is just that, an unwavering sense of destiny among a group of humans who, for whatever reason, started out together in a place, developed a history, and used that history to create a future out of its present. Black people had that history, that shared sense of experience, and managed somehow challenges wherever they went, and demanded to be taken on face value, to be appreciated, seen as beautiful, despite the ugliness of lives in America, and did so regardless of what anyone else thought. Locke demanded that artists be able to carve a beauty out of that mean experience without being forced to reference continually the struggle in the streets for citizenship rights, seemingly always denied them. He wished for art that transcended the need, however valuable, to generate propaganda to fight the good fight for America. Black people, in other words, were more than simply civil rights. They were a people with a right to all humanity. And Locke saw himself as the one to right that universal failing in this one crucial incident. As it turned out, Locke was an imperfect messenger of this message. Despite his argument for what today would be described as an autonomous blackness, his life was rife with doubt about black people, continually trying to escape close contact with Africans, even as he theorized about Africa, and perpetually leaving America for Europe, in part because he was gay, but also because he could not rid his mind of the image of European excellence his black Victorian upbringing had bestowed on him. The terms of survival for educated Negroes from the 19th century to now was to look askance at oneself because of what Cornel West called the white normative gaze that taught us to see ourselves in a judging mirror of what we had not done that white people had. This mirror was internalized in Locke himself, a man who struggled throughout his life with a sense of his own ugliness, though he was the most beautiful of men, a gay man constantly attracting admiring attention from men and women, but he was systematically cruel to women such as Jessie Fawcett, who might find him attractive. Curiously, this man who sought to repulse too close an intimacy with black people and independent black women was enormously attracted to motherly women of all races because he himself could not, for most of his life, separate from his own mother. There was a surprise, however, in Locke's life that's worth remembering. Being gay, homosexual, queer, whichever nomenclature works for you, actually helped Locke see unseen possibilities and craft a movement of something other than protest in the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. Something about the heteronormativeness of the present progressive era civil rights proposed him and led him to explore what one theorist calls the quiet dimensions of black humanity. Being gay meant he couldn't hang out in the marriage and mistress-driven male culture of the NAACP, dominated by Du Bois and his extramarital affairs. Being gay screened Locke from certain kinds of couplings and opened up others, deeper resources of how one could affect change more subtly, more indirectly, for it opened the door to what else was in the black closet. A whole range of feelings, loves, triumphs, and epiphanies routinely hidden by the need always to keep one's life one-dimensional, to fight the races to the death. Something about the hidden nature of Locke's desire allowed him to see into the hidden dimensions of the black experience and write in such a way that the rococo curves and moves of his writings gave permission to other gay writers and artists to go forward like scouts of a queer nation in black and create worlds of signification that went beyond blackness. Locke felt that there was something in the new Negro for all of us. Perhaps Locke's most important conceptualization, then, is that a new Negro is always in us, hidden, clouded over by trauma, travesty, and travail, but they are waiting for us to address and revive. A spirit lurks in the shadows of America that, if summoned, can launch a renaissance of shared humanity. That is his most profound gift to us. In African Americans, his gift is also to attend to what black people have actually done, to constantly reinvent ourselves over decades and centuries, creating new forms of art and life, despite the current state of race. However limited that notion is today in an era of recognition of the systemic nature of racism and its structural shackles on our lives, there's something empowering about the notion that each of us can pick up a brush, a pen, some clay, a computer, an app, and create something new, like those in the decrepit 1970s who picked up a turntable and turned it into a music industry. A new Negro is in all of us, not just African Americans, but every American who embraces this capacity for reinvention through African forms, because those forms are in them, too, waiting, like the rest of us, to be released and soar.
Thank you. In Citizens United, the Supreme Court held that corporations have the same free speech right as individuals to spend their money on elections. And just this past June, the Supreme Court held that corporations have religious liberty rights and allowed a bakery to refuse to sell a wedding cake to a same-sex couple. How did corporations come to have our most fundamental rights? In December 1882, former New York Senator Roscoe Conkling appeared before the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. Conkling told the justices that corporations like his client, the Southern Pacific Railroad Company, were entitled to equal rights under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Although that provision said that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, Conkling insisted that the amendment's drafters intended to cover business corporations too. Now, Conkling's claim was remarkable. The 14th Amendment had been adopted after the Civil War to guarantee the rights of the newly freed slaves, not to protect corporations. Conkling, however, had unusual credibility with the justices. A longtime leader of the Republican Party, Conkling had even been nominated to the Supreme Court himself. Although the Senate confirmed him, he declined the position. He was simply making too much money as a lawyer for the railroads. More than most lawyers then, Conkling was considered by the justices to be their peer. And when it came to the history surrounding the drafting of the 14th Amendment, Conkling's expertise was unparalleled. As a member of Congress, Conkling had been on the very committee that wrote the amendment, and he was the last surviving member of that committee. Conkling argued that while the nation was focused on the rights of the freedmen, he and the other drafters were also worried about laws that unduly burdened business corporations. It was for this very reason that the 14th Amendment used the word person. An early draft of the amendment had guaranteed the right of equal protection to, quote, citizens. Conkling argued, but that the language was later changed, he said, to include corporations, which were often considered persons for various legal purposes. As a result, Conkling argued, the 14th Amendment guaranteed the Southern Pacific Railroad Company the same right to equal protection of the laws as the former slaves. There was just one small problem with Conkling's account of the drafting of the 14th Amendment. It was not true. We now know that the language of the amendment had never been changed the way Conkling suggested, nor had any of the other framers and drafters of the 14th Amendment ever suggested or even implied that the amendment protected corporations. One of the preeminent figures in American politics had attempted instead to deceive the justices of the Supreme Court in an effort to win constitutional protections for the Southern Pacific Railroad. The justices eventually embraced Conkling's argument that corporations had rights protected by the 14th Amendment. And at the same time that the court was reading the amendment narrowly for racial minorities, upholding Jim Crow laws in the infamous Plessy against Ferguson, 1896, the court was reading the Constitution broadly to invalidate laws regulating businesses, such as minimum wage laws and zoning laws and child labor laws. Between 1868, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, and 1912, the justices decided 28 cases dealing with the rights of African Americans under the 14th Amendment, and an astonishing 312 cases on the rights of business corporations. The 14th Amendment, adopted to shield the former slaves from discrimination, had been transformed into a sword used by corporations to strike at unwanted regulation. Thank you.
Continuai a rigirarmi nella testa le parole dell'editore e poiché il buono che potevo trovarci risultò sempre più esile, l'irritazione iniziale si mutò in rabbia. A scuola quella parola non piaceva, maestri e professori ci correggevano. No rabbia, ci rimproveravano, si dice ira, la rabbia ce l'hanno i cani. Ma la lingua napoletana che si parlava nel Basto, al Pendino, al mercato, i quartieri in cui ero cresciuto io e prima erano cresciuti mio padre, i nonni e i bisnonni, forse tutti i miei antenati, non conosceva la parola ira, l'ira di Achille e di altri attivi dentro i libri, ma solo araggio. La gente di questa città, pensai, di questi quartieri e piazze, strade e vichi e banchine del porto piene di fatica e carichi e scarichi illegali, s'arraggiava, non si adirava, s'arraggiava a casa, per strada, soprattutto quando vagava in cerca di soldi senza trovarne, e spesso bastava poco per azzannarsi con altri arraggiati. La raggia, sì, la raggia, altro che l'ira. Ti sei adirato, vi siete adirati, si sono adirati, ma che? Maestri e professori ci davano un vocabolario che era inservibile per quella strada. Grazie.
We walked quite a ways. We went toward Sant'Anna alle Paludi and then toward Porta Nolana. The child tried first to stop at every store of Chinese knickknacks, at every parked motorcycle or scooter that he wanted to examine, to show me how powerful they were. But since I pulled away without paying attention, he ended up walking ahead of me in silence. I was the one once or twice who spoke to him, but only to remind myself that he was there, that I was holding his hand.
The rest of the time, I kept turning over the publisher's words in my head, and since whatever positive spin I could give felt increasingly flimsy, the initial irritation turned to rage. That word was frowned upon in school. Teachers and professors would correct us. Not rage, they would scold. We say ire, rabid dogs rage. But the Neapolitan that was spoken in Vasto, at the Pendino, at the market, the neighborhoods where I was raised, and before that my father and grandparents and great-grandparents, maybe all my ancestors put together, didn't know the word ire, the wrath of Achilles and others who lived in books. They only knew araggia, rage. The people in this city, I thought, in these neighborhoods and squares and streets and alleyways and stalls by the port filled with toil and illegal loading and unloading, got enraged. They didn't grow irate. They raged at home on the street, above all when they wandered in search of money and didn't find it. And often it didn't take much to maul others in a rage. La raggia, yes, rage, to hell with ire. Did you grow irate? Did you and he? Did they? Give me a break. Teachers and professors gave us a vocabulary that was useless on those streets. It was a city full of dogs, and ire had nothing to do with my bloodshot eyes as I roamed streets like the one we were turning onto now that led onto Garibaldi Way. When I would get out of school and didn't want to go home because I was furious with classmates who tormented me, with sadistic teachers, it was rage that split my chest, my eyes, my head, and to calm myself down, I'd take the long way. I'd go down Porta Nolana. Sometimes I went up Via San Cosmo. Other times when my blood wouldn't stop boiling, I'd go down Lavinaio, I'd go down the Carmine. I'd walk wild through blighted neighborhoods until I reached the port. And if someone bumped into me on the street, there was trouble. I swore saints and Madonnas up and down, not irate, but in a rage. And I'd laugh mockingly, then spit. I'd throw punches, hoping to receive them in return. No one who knows me today would think it, but that's exactly how I was. How lovely it would be, I said to myself, to return to Milan and after half a century re-emerge as I'd been as an adolescent. March straight without stopping onto Corso Genova, enter the building where the publishing house has its offices, go up to the third floor, and without preamble, spit in the face of that ill-mannered upstart who criticized my work without respect. Not just those illustrations, no, but the work of a lifetime. A pity the season of rage had died. I'd smothered it long ago. Do you know what araggia means? I asked Mario. You shouldn't talk like that, Grandpa.
This is the third year Isaac and I have hosted the finalist reading, and I think it's fair to say, y'all are mad as hell this year. These finalists are fired up. I get it. Okay, so we've reached our last group of the evening. Group 4 will be bookended by 2 finalists in translation. So we will start with Margaret Mitsutani, reading in Japanese, and reading on behalf of Yoko Tawada will be Monique Chuang. And then we will have Jamel Brinkley, Lauren Groff, Brandon Hobson, Rebecca Mackay, and Sigrid Nunez. And we will end our night with one more finalist in translation, Olga Tarchushik and Jennifer Croft.
Good evening. Actually, because Yoko Tawada can't be here, she has asked Monique Trong to take her place. But just for the reading, I'm going to be Yoko and Monique is going to be me. Just to get that straight. Yoshiro wa Shinjuku eki kara Narita kukou made無人エクスプレスに乗っている自分を想像してみる。実際は空港行きの電車なども存在しないし、カタカナ独特の高価な速度を売りつけるエクスプレスに乗る人もエスプレッソを飲む人も見当たらない。空港ターミナル駅の改札を出て空港内に入ると関所にも誰もいないので料券を見せる必要もない。 ターミナルと書かれた看板は外されてそのまま壁に立てかけてある。びくともしないエスカレーターを階段代わりに登ってギシギシ登っていくと、どのチェックインポイントも無人で、搭乗には雨傘のように大きな蜘蛛の巣がかかっている。立ち止まってみると、そんな蜘蛛の巣の端に手のひらぐらいの大きさの蜘蛛が身を潜めてじっと獲物を待っている。蜘蛛の背中の羽の端模様は上から黒、赤、黄色、これからドイツに飛ぶところだから、そういう色の組み合わせなんだろうと吉郎は納得する。恐る恐る隣のカウンターに目をやると、赤、白、青の縞模様の雲がいた。星の模様を散りばめた赤い雲もいる。どういうわけか、吉郎はそんな空港の様子をはっきりと思い浮かべることができる。自分から思い浮かべようとしなくても、映像が勝手に脳に入ってきて、小説に書いてくれとせがむ。しかし、誰も行く人のいない空港の様子を書くのは危険である。仮にそこに何か国家機密が隠されていて、誰も行けないように工夫が凝らされているとする。吉郎は禁じられた場所にうまく潜り込んで秘密を探り出すつもりなど全くない。しかし自分の空想の中の空港を綿密に描写して作品として発表し、たまたまそれが事実と一致した場合、国家機密を漏らしたのと同じことだと言いがかりがつけられて、逮捕されてしまうかもしれない。空想だということを裁判で立証することは意外に難しいのではないか。そもそも裁判はちゃんと行われるのか。吉郎は自分が投獄されるところを想像しても、それほど恐ろしさは感じないが、一人残された無名がどうやって生きていくのかを考えると心配で、危険を冒す気にはなれない。
Yoshiro imagined himself at Shinjuku Station, boarding a deserted Narita Express for the airport. In fact, no one was riding the express, the train whose foreign name had once projected the very image of speed or drinking espresso. At the airport terminal, there was no one at the checkpoint, so no need to show his passport. The terminal sign, written in Chinese characters, had been taken down long ago and was now propped up against a wall. Climbing the creaky steps of the frozen escalator, he found all the check-in counters abandoned, a huge spider's web covering each one like an umbrella. Looking more closely, he saw that there was a spider, about the size of the palm of his hand, in each one, calmly waiting for prey. There were colorful stripes on one spider's back, black at the top, red, and then yellow. Germany was his destination. That must explain it, he thought. He took a cautious look at the counter next door and saw that its spider had red, white, and blue stripes. There were smaller red spiders here and there in the web, too, with white stars on their backs. Yoshiro didn't know why he was able to picture the airport so clearly. With no effort on his part, these images just came to him, begging to be written into a novel. But it would be dangerous to write about an airport nobody went to anymore. What if the government was keeping it off limits to the public on purpose? Because state secrets were hidden there. Sneaking into a forbidden place to dig up forbidden knowledge didn't interest him at all. But even if what he published was only a description of what he had imagined, if his fiction happened to correspond too closely to what the airport was really like, he might be arrested for leaking state secrets. Proving in a court of law that it had come from his imagination might be awfully difficult. And would they even give him a trial? Not that he found the idea of going to prison particularly frightening, but wondering how Mume would survive without him worried him so much that he couldn't bring himself to take many risks. Thank you.
A lucky man. When Lincoln met Alexis years earlier, they were equals. He was as handsome as she was beautiful and bright, and despite their age difference, he had as much to expect from the coming years as she did. Lincoln courted her with a passion rooted in his certainty about himself. He'd been a good student and had excelled at boxing and football. His life had been full of prizes, trophies, and scholarships. He'd had more than his share of attention from women and had enjoyed the warmth and cheer of many men. He thought often about the question of what lay ahead in his life, but when he tried to see its exact outlines, he couldn't. It was indistinct with light. It had been this way with her, too. At Garfield's bar, he would tell his buddies how it hurt to look at her, and they would agree, mistaking his words for their usual hyperbole about women. On one of those nights at Garfield's, it occurred to him briefly that love was pain. When he was engaged to Alexis, his friends would tell him how lucky he was, but this was said as a joke. Lincoln would say thank you and agree, would tell them how grateful he was for her, but this wasn't true. He deserved her. This was what he believed, and he knew this was what his friends believed in. A man of a kind should get what he deserves, and if a man like him couldn't get a woman like her, then something was terribly wrong with the world. Do her friends tell her she's lucky, Lincoln wondered. Has her mother told her to give thanks for her man? She might be saying it now as they picked out plums and nectarines together at the fruit market, or sat out on the porch shelling peas. But surely this was foolish thinking, just as foolish as thinking their daughter, Tamika, would spend these years breaking the hearts of any eager Georgetown boy who wasn't like her father. Lincoln came to understand that this, too, had always been a part of his vision for himself. To have children who adored him, a son who resembled and worshiped him, a daughter for whom no other man would ever measure up. This was part of what he couldn't see before he married. But there was no son, and the years of their daughter's life had marked his decline. She had grown up watching it. His professional gambles with the boxing gyms and the attempts at training and managing had failed. Now his charm and stature no longer earned him opportunities, and in New York he had no reputation. He was lucky, he knew, to have his job, steady and respectable work, but years ago he and his wife had deserved each other. Time had not treated them equally. Why did he expect otherwise, though? With any two people, one would get the brunt of it, and time had hit him worse than any beating he'd ever seen in the ring. He felt it had brutalized him. One day his wife's looks would go. Creases would line her face, the skin there would loosen and thin, pouches would form under her eyes, maybe little dewlaps like his under the jaw. And her mind, it would start to slip and show weakness too. Everything cracks eventually, but when? How long would it be his good fortune to have her? How long until he could just plain have her again? Her smooth face. Even after all these years, he longed for it, to rub his cheek against hers and breathe hot words into her hair. There'd been no diminishment of that feeling. He still had those appetites, and she did too. Yet he also felt the urge to press the sharps of his teeth against her face, to bite down and place the first deep crack in it. But Lincoln was a man with luck. Yes, he still had it. People said so, and they were right. Good fortune can change in an instant, however, or it might never. But whatever it does has nothing to do with you. For years it had persisted in following him. It went home from work with him, lived with his family, claimed a space between him and his wife in their bed. She still had her light, but his was his luck. If it left him, she would too. No one would blame her. Or maybe Lincoln's luck had already abandoned him. His wife was gone now after all. Or maybe Lincoln was the one with wrong notions. Maybe, slumped now in the chair at his desk, unable to muster the little strength it took to hold in his belly, it was his luck that he was alone with.
Hi, thanks for hanging in there. This is the end of a story called Ghosts and Empties, where a woman walks her rage at night, rage again. And so I walk, and at some point near the wildly singing frogs, I look up, and out of the darkness, a stun. The new possessor of the old nunnery has installed uplighting, not on the aesthetic blank of the cube, but rather on the ardent live oak in front of it. So old and so broad, it spreads out over a half acre. I've always known the tree was there, and my children have often swung on its low branches and from the bark plucked out ferns and epiphytes with which to adorn my head. But the tree has never before announced itself fully as the colossus it is, with its branches that are so heavy they grow toward the ground, then touch and grow upward again, and thus, elbowing itself up, it brings to mind a woman at the kitchen table, knuckling her chin and dreaming. I stand shocked by its beauty, and as I look, I imagine the swans on their island seeing the bright spark in the night and feeling their swan hearts moved. I heard that they have started building a nest again, though how they can bear it after all they've lost, I do not know. I hope they understand, my sons, both now and in the future, just materializing in the dark, that all these hours their mother has been walking so swiftly away from them, I have not been gone. That my spirit hours ago slipped back into the house and crept into the room where their early rising father had already fallen asleep, usually before 8 p.m., and that I touched this gentle man whom I love so desperately and somehow fear so much, touched him on the pulse in his temple and felt his dreams, which are too distant for the likes of me. And I climbed the creaking old stairs, and at the top split into two. And heading into the boys' separate rooms, I slid through the crack under the doors and curled myself on the pillows to breathe into me the breath that my children breathed out. Every pause between one breath and the end of one breath and the beginning of the next is long. Then again, nothing is not always in transition. Soon, tomorrow, the boys will be men, then the men will leave the house, and my husband and I will look at each other crouching under the weight of all that we wouldn't or couldn't yell, as well as all of those hours outside walking together, my body, my shadow, and the moon. It is terribly true, even if the truth does not comfort, that if you look at the moon for long enough, night after night, as I have, You will see that the old cartoons are correct, that the moon is, in fact, laughing. But it is not laughing at us, we lonely humans, who are far too small and our lives far too fleeting for it to give us any notice at all. Okay, thank you.
Before my mother was locked up, the thought of being kidnapped intrigued me. And there was even a time when I lay in bed some nights, wanting someone to break into our house and take me. The thought never terrified me. Kidnappers were murderers in disguise. I knew this. Yet my own kidnapper would be different. My own kidnapper would be some old person drugged on prescription painkillers, too weak or sad to really hurt me. Someone whose idea of comfort meant sitting in silence, staring at an old black and white movie on TV. I would be force-fed and not allowed to talk. I would have to watch my kidnapper sleep in a recliner while it rained outside. We would be far away from any city, in a rural area, just the two of us, but it wouldn't be sexual or weird in any way. I would be allowed to walk around the house as I pleased. I would never be bound by rope or tied to any structure. At times, he would let me hit him with an object, just enough to bruise or draw blood. He would like being treated this way. The environment would feel dangerous only when I considered the police showing up to arrest my kidnapper, drawing their weapons and breaking down the door. I became obsessed with this thought for a long time. Thank you.
Okay. Most of The Great Believers is set in 1980s Chicago at the height of the American AIDS epidemic. But every other chapter, and this is what I'm going to read from, is a woman named Fiona who's in 2015 Paris, looking back at that time. She lost her brother and a lot of her friends. The two things you need to know here, one is when she first got there, someone was trying to show her some photo albums, but she wasn't ready to look at them. She's ready now. She's alone. The other thing you need to know is that her job is that she works in Chicago at a resale shop that benefits AIDS housing. She looked at the pigeon that had landed on the balcony rail. She was not ready to look at Richard's videos, but maybe she could work her way there by looking through Richard's photo albums. She closed the balcony, poured a glass of milk, took a few deep breaths. There were probably 20 albums on the shelf, a fact Fiona hadn't absorbed that first day. Rows of black leather, brown leather, colored canvas. Boxes full of slides as well, but she wouldn't mess with those. When she pulled a thick red album off the shelf, though, a paper slipped out and landed on the floor. Fiona attempted to clutch the album closed before anything else fell, but she dropped the whole thing, and now there were papers everywhere. Cream-colored sheets folded in half, small cards, a lavender page with a grainy photo of a man. They were funeral bulletins and prayer cards. She got on her knees and started stacking them up. This wasn't a photo album at all, she saw, when she opened it to an old clipping from Out Loud Chicago, an obituary of someone who danced with the Alvin Ailey Theater, Jesus. She opened the album at the beginning and tried to slide the papers back into the empty spots. A man named Oscar, no one she remembered, had died in 1984. A clipping about Katsu Tatami from 1986. Here was the bulletin for Terrence Robinson, Nico's Terrence. She must have put this bulletin together herself, but she didn't remember it. Jonathan Byrd, Dwight Sumner. There were so impossibly many. In her current life, it happened at least once a week that someone would wander into the store And then, when they discovered its mission, say something like, "Oh, I remember that time." Fiona had learned to check her temper, to push her toes into the floor so her face didn't change. "I knew someone whose cousin had it," they'd continue. "Did you ever see Philadelphia?" And they'd shake their heads in dismay. And how could she answer? They meant well, all of them. How could she explain that this city was a graveyard? That they were walking every day through streets where there had been a Holocaust, a mass murder of neglect and antipathy? That when they stepped through a pocket of cold air, didn't they understand it was a ghost? It was a boy the world had spat out. Here in her hand, a stack of ghosts. Thank you.
We know they think, but do dogs have opinions? The writer Milan Kundera makes much of the fact that, unlike us, animals don't feel disgust. I'm not so sure about this, not even cats. But that dogs are not critical or judgmental is undeniably a big part of what endears them to us. This is what made educators think having kids with reading problems read aloud to dogs was a great idea. Also, perhaps why performers like Laurie Anderson and Yo-Yo Ma have reported looking out at their concert audience and fantasizing that it's all dogs. Gratitude. I don't believe people are imagining it when they attribute this feeling to their rescue dog. I often feel that my Apollo is grateful toward me. I want to know if he looks forward to things. She'll be home soon. Can't wait to eat. Tomorrow is another day. Even more, I want to know how he remembers the past. Does he have yearnings, regrets, sweet, sweet memories, bittersweet ones? With senses as keen as theirs, why couldn't dogs have Proustian moments? Why couldn't they have eureka moments, epiphanies, and so on? In the beginning, I sometimes caught him staring at me only to turn away when I looked back. Now he often rests his block of a head on my knees and tips his eyes at me with a speaking expression. Do you talk to Apollo? My therapist asks. Well, yes. To encourage bonding, it is recommended that people talk to their dogs, which seems to come naturally, though my guess is people are doing it less and less thanks to our attention-devouring devices. I once heard a stranger in agitated conversation with her pug. "And I suppose it's all my fault again, isn't it?" she said. At which I swear the dog rolled its eyes. What do you talk to him about? The therapist wants to know. Mostly I seem to ask questions. What's up, pup? Did you have a nice nap? Were you chasing something in your sleep? Do you want to go out? Are you hungry? Are you happy? Does your arthritis hurt? Why won't you play with other dogs? Do you want me to read to you? Do you want me to sing? Who loves you? Do you love me? Will you love me forever? Do you wanna dance? Am I the best person you've ever had? Can you tell that I've been drinking? Do these jeans make me look fat? If we could talk to the animals, goes the song, meaning if they could talk to us. But of course, that would ruin everything. Thank you.
Hi guys, I think that it's too late to read in Polish, so Jennifer Croft will read in English, please.
You can. She's going to tell you the title.
Polish title, you mean? Just Bieguni.
Yeah. You just abandoned me in front of all these people.
Okay, the tongue is the strongest muscle. There are countries out there where people speak English, but not like us. We have our own languages hidden in our carry-on luggage, in our cosmetics bags, only ever using English when we travel, and then only in foreign countries, to foreign people. It's hard to imagine, but English is their real language. Oftentimes, their only language. They don't have anything to fall back on or turn to in moments of doubt. How lost they must feel in the world, where all instructions, all the lyrics of all the stupidest possible songs, all the menus, all the excruciating pamphlets and brochures, even the buttons in the elevator are in their private language. They may be understood by anyone at any moment, whenever they open their mouths. They must have to write things down in special codes. Wherever they are, people have unlimited access to them. They are accessible to everyone and everything. I heard there are plans in the works to get them some little language of their own. One of those dead ones no one else is using anyway. Just so that for once they can have something just for themselves.
Polish, Polish, Polish. I love it. I love it. That was wonderful. Woo.
Ladies and gentlemen, you made it. Give yourselves a round of applause.
And can we have the finalists just stand one more time? Thank you all so much.
One more time.
Wow.
Come on, clap it for these people. What a beautiful night of literature.
So good. I love it. You're all winners in our books. Congratulations. There are more books, of course, to buy at the back. See you tomorrow night at the awards.
Woo!